Parashat Vayishlach. So we turn to page 247, where the title says, Binyamin is born, Rachel passes away. We have it on verse 16. Chapter 35, verse 16. So the Torah says, they journeyed from Bethel, and there was still considerable distance to come to Ephrat. When Rachel went into labor, her labor was difficult. And then when she was having difficulty with giving birth, her midwife said to her, do not be afraid, as this one too is a son for you. And then as her soul was departing and she was dying, she named him Benoni, son of my sorrow. But his father called him Binyamin, the son of the south, i.e. the land of Canaan. Rachel died, she was buried on the road to Ephrat, which is Bethlehem. Yaakov erected a monument on her grave, which is a monument for Rachel's grave until today. So here we read about the story of Kever Rachel. Anyone here been to Kever Rachel? Yes. Very few. I highly recommend you go. Every time we do a trip to Israel, we take everyone to Kever Rachel, Marat HaMachpelah. In any case, so what do we read? Read about the passing of Rachel. Why did she pass away? Because she's giving birth and she has a hard time, she passed away. Anything in the story that you pick up? Except for the fact that she's passed away and she's buried in Ephrat, Terech Bethlehem, on the way to Ephrat. What else do we see?
When the midwife is telling her not to be afraid?
Yeah, she's saying you want to be afraid because there was going to be 12 tribes, so you have an equal portion. Just like the concubines have 2, you also have 2, that's good. Fine. What else happens? Exactly. So Rachel says, I want to call him Benoni. And Yaakov says, no, we're going to call him Binyamin. And which name sticks? Binyamin. What do you think? Is that nice?
Yes.
Yes. Why?
Because it's a much more better name for the future. It's my right hand, and Benoni has got sorrow in it. So for me, for somebody to carry such a name, he had a responsibility.
Okay, so we hear over here that one has got the name of sorrow, the other one is my right hand man, so therefore he's got it right. Let me ask you a question. Who gave all the names? Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Issachar, Zvulun, Gad, Naphtali, Dan, Yaakov. Everyone agree with that? Huh? The wives did. Every single name, the first 6 boys were born to Leah. Vatomer Leah ba Gad, ותקרא את שמו גד. ותאמר Leah, כי שמע השם כי שנואה אנוכי. ותאמר, הפעם ילווה אישי אליי, ותקרא שמו לוי. Every time, it is the wives. When Yosef is born, ותאמר רחל, אסף אלוקים את חרפתי, ותקרא שמו Yosef. Who gave him the name? Rachel. When the maids give birth, ותאמר רחל דנני אלוקים, what's the word? So she calls him Dan. Every time it's the mothers. So why suddenly here it's Yaakov and not Rachel? Whose job is it to do it? The wives or the men? Obviously the wives. If 11 are wives, so it's clear that it's the wives. So why suddenly now no?
She's good.
No, she was alive. If it would have happened after she dies, she doesn't give a name. Okay, what can you do? But here Rachel is saying, I want to call him Benoni. Suddenly no. Let me ask you another question. Even if we think that Binyamin is a nicer name, what about the fact that she's about to die? Wouldn't it be the most humane, menschlich? You know the word menschlich? No? Like a mensch. You don't know the word mensch?
Yeah.
What's a mensch?
Like the right thing to do.
Ben Adam, to be a mensch means to be a human, to be compassionate.
To do the right.
To do the right thing, to care. We have a thing which is called tzavaat shchiv mera, which means that if somebody's on their deathbed, anything they say, we do. I mean, of course, if it's within halakha or whatever. Many times you hear people, they say, apparently it was on his last moments, he asked you, so it's very important, so I'm going to do this. She's on her last breaths, and she's asking to call her son Benoni. What does Yaakov say? Nah, sorry, I got a better name. What do you know about names? Is that nice? What's the message over here? So we're reading this in 2024. We hear about a story of a wonderful woman called Rachel, and she's just about to die. She has one final request, and her husband says, Yalla, Zuzi, and he calls her the way what he thinks. So now all the men are going to read this and they're going to say, okay, we don't listen to our wives. What do they know? We have the right idea. And so what if it's a sensitive situation? So what? Who cares? What do you think?
But the timing also changed.
Well, she felt sorrow that actually maybe Yaakov didn't want the child to have that sorrow in him as his grandson.
So that's what the Torah is teaching us. If your wife feels sorrow, but you don't feel that way, you don't think it's the right thing, so just disregard her.
But the timing has changed. Because before, now the responsibility of Jacob is Israel. So now this is the only child that is born after this whole idea of Israel is
Correct, that's what
done.
Rashi says. That's why it's in the brackets.
And now he thinks future. He thinks that this child will maybe have a different.
I understand. It calls him Binyamin. Yamin means the Israel, the east, as Rashi says. And now he was in the east. He's the only child born in Israel. All the other children were born in the diaspora. And he says, no, I'm going to call him Binyamin. He's born here in Israel.
No, but I don't mean about that. I mean.
I understand. Of course, Yaakov had an important reason. I never for 1 second thought that when Yaakov thinks it's be a different name, he's just saying to his wife, you know what? I don't have a good name. You have a good name, but I don't like it. Of course, we know Yaakov has a good name. But still, wouldn't we put aside his good name and everything aside from the fact that his wife wants this name? So what if he, there's other name, for example, Shimon. What is Shimon? Shama Hashem ki snua anochi. It's also to do with sorrow. Hashem heard that I am not loved like my sister. So what should Yaakov say? Actually, no, bad connotations, let's change it. They didn't interfere in any of the names. You get the question, Sarah?
Yes.
Do you agree with my question?
Yeah.
He had a bigger rule.
Huh?
Bigger rule. He had a bigger rule in the future of Israel.
Role.
Yeah, role.
Still, I understand. They all had their roles. I mean, the truth is that if you look, the one son that didn't really have any role of leadership was Binyamin. He did nothing. There's actually a beautiful part of the Talmud which talks all about it, but I'm not going to go in there now because we don't have time. But he didn't have any role of leadership. Well, all his brothers did. Anyway, it needs clarifying. In order to understand it, maybe Yaakov didn't love Rachel, so therefore he didn't care for what she thinks. What do you think? Is that an answer?
No.
Why not? Huh? How do you know he loved her? Because the Torah tells us. How many times did it tell us he loved her? For example, with Yitzchak, the Torah also says that he loved his wife Rivka. But it says only once.
At least twice, maybe more than that. The
3
first time
times.
was 3 times.
The only person in the entire Tanakh that it says that he loved his wife 3 times is Yaakov. So you tell me, is this the way love is? So we know it's for sure that he loved her. So does love mean that you disregard what somebody wants because you think better? It says in the Rambam, what is the responsibility of a man towards his husband and what is the responsibility of a woman towards her husband? Whenever I officiate weddings, so beforehand I do a shiur with the Chatanim and the Kalot, and we read this text from the Rambam, we try to understand it. Many times at the beginning, the boys and the girls, they come in and they think, the Rambam is very misogynistic, he's very archaic, he's very old-fashioned. And by the time they finish learning and understand, they walk away, they're blown away. They say, wow, so much wisdom in a short section of the Rambam. They can't believe how their perspective changes. But the Rambam writes that a man has to love his wife more than he loves himself. Respect his wife more than he respects himself. What does it mean to respect somebody? Respect somebody means to say, I don't see the same way as you, but I respect you. That's the definition of respect. The word respect means let's say, for example, for a woman, flowers may be very important. For a man, what's a waste? 2 days ago, it's been a bin. But he respects, and he says, no, if it's important to you, I buy it. Or a woman may think that a man watching football is like, what a waste of time. Bunch of guys running after a ball. But she respects, and she's okay, if this is what you enjoy, fine, do it. The respect is precisely when it's not what your natural instinct tells you is an important thing. So precisely if he loved and respected, he should have said, you know what? I think this thing, but because I love you and I respect you, so we're going to do what you say. Now, is this the first time that we see that Yaakov seemingly shows disrespect to his wife? Or is there anything else? So in order to answer this question, we need to go back. And we need to see another time when Yaakov and Rachel don't see eye to eye. And again, we could ask a similar question. If we can answer over there, maybe we can answer over here. But most importantly, how we apply it for ourselves. Because we'll be able to apply it to marriage, but we'll be able to apply it also in the grand scheme of things on our day-to-day engagement with people. So in the previous parasha, the Torah tells us that all the 3 other wives have children, and the only one who doesn't have a child is Rachel was barren. So what happens when she's barren? Let's turn the page and see. What? She gave a maid, yes? But before that, what happens before she gives the maid? Anyone remember?
She was jealous of her sister.
She was jealous of his sister, yeah, it's true.
And she said, I deserve to be dead.
Exactly. She said, I'd better be dead. So what does Yaakov say to her?
You need to cry.
Hmm?
I can cry for you. You need to cry.
I can't pray, you need to pray. Let's see the words inside. On page 205. That's right. Verse 1. Can you see it right in the middle of the page, 205? It says, Rachel saw that she had not borne Yaakov children. Rachel was jealous of her sister's good deeds, due to which she had merited children. So she sees that she has good deeds. You need to pay attention very carefully to the words. Her sister has good deeds, and therefore she has good children. So what does that mean? That Rachel doesn't have good deeds? Huh? She doesn't have children, right? So does that mean that she doesn't have good deeds? Can we say that about Rachel? Did she not give her sister the signs? Was she? Huh?
No, you can't say it on her.
So what does that mean when the Torah says, as if she didn't have good deeds? Anyway, so she says to Yaakov, give me children through your prayers, otherwise I'm as good as dead. Now, can you hear the pain? Can you hear the anguish? Can you hear how she's like a suffering woman? She's desperate to have a child. She's thinking, maybe I haven't done enough good deeds, or whatever it may be. She sees everyone around. Forget about the deeds, prayer. Just a simple one. A permanent person doesn't have kids. Married for many years. It's a painful thing. She comes to her husband and she expresses her pain. Before you read the next verse, what would a woman, and you're all women, expect a man to do? Comfort. Sympathize. First of all, forget about Mr. Fix It. Just acknowledge. Say, I feel your pain. Something like that, right? But what does he do? He get angry.
Because
Yeah.
maybe she blames him. Maybe she, in a way, she
So even if she blamed him, when somebody's going through pain and they blame you,
She
understand.
told him go to another woman to see if he can have the boy.
Yaakov became man of Rachel. He said, am I in place of God who has withheld the fruit of your womb? So what he gets angry.
Because he's got more faith.
He's got more faith. Okay, but again, it seems the same issue. What's the issue? You have all good answers, right? When we said she called him Benoni, which is my suffering, and he says Benjamin. So you explained, yeah, because it means Israel, he's gonna be dead. All the explanations are beautiful, but it doesn't show any sensitivity. Also over here, show a bit of compassion, show sensitivity, show that you care. To get angry with a poor woman that she's crying her heart out and saying, I haven't had the children, please, listen to me, help me, support me. And he, what do you want for my life? He gets angry. Am I instead of God? What do you want for my life? What does she respond? Does she answer back? Does she say, huh? She said, no, listen, why are you getting angry? I'm just asking you to pray. No, she seems to accept it. Like as if, okay, I get what you're saying, and there's no comeback. So obviously there was something that we're missing over here. Because it doesn't make sense. A loving partner, a loving husband, wouldn't answer that. If somebody wanted to bring me some proofs that Yaakov wasn't a loving husband, then okay, maybe I could read this and say, yeah, this shows that he doesn't know what it means to love. I know, when you love your kids, right? When your kid comes to you crying and says, somebody hit me in school or something, what do you do? What's the first thing you do? You hug them. Do you say to them, yeah? First tell me who started up with who? And who is first? And what did you do to the kid's crying? You give him a hug. You calm him down. Then you want to have a discussion with him, maybe. By the way, that would be maybe the difference between a father and a mother. Maybe a father might do, but a mother is full of love. She would never do that. Yaakov, it says he loved Rachel. So what's going on over here?
He thinks it's God's decision.
100% he thinks it's God's decision. Let's say, even if that is the case. So say to your wife, I feel so bad for you. What can I do? This is God's decision. Not to get angry with her. Not to attack. Not to come back a ton of bricks.
But she's not seeing that. So maybe he's angry that she's not seeing that it's God's...
Okay, so obviously she's not seeing something that he wants her to see. And obviously when he tells her what he sees, she accepts it. And by the way, you see straight after, on the next page, what's on verse 22? God remembered Rachel had divulged Yaakov's code to Leah to save it from Esau. She feared Yaakov would divorce her for being childless, whatever, whole bracket. So God listened to her and opened the womb. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son. So something changes very shortly after this conversation. And also it says, God remembered, what did he remember? That she gave her sons the signs to her sister. So something's happened over here. When did she give the signs to her sister? Before the wedding, which was many years before. So if she gave the signs to her sister many years before, why suddenly now if remembering the fact that she gave the signs to her sister is the merit that she's going to have a child, she died that long time before. So why didn't she have a child before?
But she did a lot of other marriages too.
Exactly, she did a lot of other marriages too, so she should have had a son. Yeah? So we're actually doing a course right now on Wednesday evenings. It's called, what's it called? Nurturing relationships. And there we're talking about different relationships and how to be more sympathetic. We've learned how to discuss things in a way that people should listen to you. We've learned how to be, disagree in a way that's the right way to disagree and that your point of view goes across. And B'ezrat Hashem tonight, you know what we're learning about tonight? You remember? You remember? How to see the good in other people. Very easy, we have what's called the negativity bias. When we see people, straight away we see their bad stuff. Or, when somebody does something bad, straight away it's on the news and people will remember it for 20 years. But they can do 100 things which are good and nobody even remembers. So how do we change that? Anyway, so in this particular course, we brought a story, and I think that this story can help us a lot in understanding this story in the Parashat today. The story is a story in the Talmud, and it's about a man who came to Bet Shammai, to Shammai, the old man Shammai, and he said to him, I want you to convert me whilst I'm standing on one foot. Anyone remember that story? Yes. I've spoken about it many times. So what did Shammai say? He said, go away. You can't. You want to study that? Imagine I come to the Brandeis University, Oxford, Cambridge. I want to become a professor or whatever. Standing on one foot, in a few. Go away. So then he came to Hillel. He said to Hillel, I'm standing on one foot. Tell me the whole Torah. So what did Hillel say to him? You don't remember?
So no, he said the Torah is mitzvot and the rest is...
No, he said, Ma tesani alach, lechavrach lo tavid. Don't do to others what you don't want done to yourself. Zoi kol ha-Torah kula, ve'idach perushahu. That is the whole Torah, and all the rest is commentary. Which obviously leaves us wondering, how does that make sense? How can Hillel tell him, what you don't want done to you, don't do to others? That's the whole Torah. All the rest, commentary. Does that make sense? There's many explanations, but they don't all really explain it fully. So Rashi, for example, he says that it's talking about Hashem. What don't do to your fellow, he's not talking about human, but rather God. But does that make sense, really? Hillel didn't say don't do unto God what he doesn't like. If he said God, then include the whole Torah. God doesn't want you to desecrate Shabbat. He doesn't want you to eat non-kosher. He doesn't want you to do, not tzniut. He doesn't want you to worship idols. So it makes sense. Don't do to Hashem what he doesn't like. That's the whole Torah. But he doesn't say Hashem, he says your fellow. So some commentators say, no, it means like, there's a lot of mitzvot between man and his fellow. So if you don't steal, you don't cheat, you don't lie, it's the whole Torah. Is that a good answer? It's also not a good answer. Why? Because there are many mitzvot between man and man, between man and your fellow, but there's plenty of mitzvot between man and Hashem. So how can by me making sure, maybe I do all the mitzvot, not to offend or to hurt somebody else. Yeah, I tick many boxes. But what about Yom Kippur? What about Sukkot? What about Lulav? What about Tefillin? What's that got to do with it? How could he say to him that by not doing to somebody what he doesn't like, being not kind to somebody, it ticks all the boxes, the whole Torah. So we have to go to Chassidut. They're the only ones that can help us in this one. And Chassidut explains like this. It says that a person who studies in Tanya, who studies Tanya here? A little bit. Tanya teaches that a person has not one soul, but rather two souls. You ever came across this teaching? You learned it. Where we have an animal soul and we have a godly soul. You remember that? What does it mean, animal soul and a godly soul? Yeah, it means obviously when we use the word animal, sometimes it sounds I've got an animal in me. But it means instinct. It means a natural soul. We have a natural soul which is inclined for materialism. It's inclined for self-serving, for self-pleasure, for the now. And we have a godly soul which is altruistic, which is thinking about spirituality, which is thinking about making good in this world and so on and so forth. And there's always a battle between the two. As a matter of fact, which one is the more dominant one? The animal soul. Why is the animal soul more dominant? Because it's the first one that we have. When a child's born, he gets only a natural soul. And only when he's bar mitzvah do they get the godly soul to help them. That's also why we say in our prayers every morning, Elokai neshama shenatata bi. We say the godly soul that you have put in me, implying that there's a me before the godly soul. Elokai neshama shenatata bi. Ata shenafachta bi. Maybe it's different sidurim. So the animal soul is our default. Our godly soul is the one which is kind of the back burner. Now, when it comes to relationships between people, what does the animal soul want? He cares about himself. The animal soul is selfish. What's the definition? Selfishness. Like an animal. An animal is very selfish. Not in a bad way. This is the way they're programmed. They think about themselves. They got an ego.
Survival instinct.
Survival. It can also not to be with survival. It could be also sometimes an animal has a lot. But it's never going to say, here, let me take a little bit. It's not going to take anything away from me and let me give it to another animal. It doesn't have that ability. Or most animals don't. It's selfish. Our animal soul is selfish, and that's the same thing. Our ego, our selfishness, all comes from our animal soul. Our godly soul is altruistic. What does that mean? It means that it cares for other people. It wants to share, it wants to do, it wants to give. All our chesed, all our kindness, all our goodness comes from our animal soul. By the way, there are animal souls that they are good. So we're not saying animal soul is bad. So for example, you have a bird which is called chasidah, a stork. Why is it called a chasidah? Chasidah comes from kindness, chesed. Yeah. Because shosach chesed im chavrotea. It does kindness with its friends. It cleans the feathers and so on. But is the chasidah a kosher bird? No, why not? Even though it's a kind animal. Normally the kosher birds are the ones that have good attributes, and the non-kosher ones are the vultures, the ones that they are not good attributes.
Do you have multiple partners?
No, also this kosher birds, the only one, the pigeon, has not got multiple partners, but a chicken has multiple partners and it's still a kosher bird. It's not, having multiple partners is okay. It's nothing which is expected to have a monogamous relationship from an animal, only from a human being. In any case, why is it not kosher? And the answer is because although it does chesed, but it does it because it's programmed.
It's not intent. There's no intention.
There's no wanting
To make chesed.
to overcome a desire to do the opposite. So chesed means that I have an animal soul which is selfish. And I say to myself, no, this is the right thing to do. So even if it's uncomfortable or if it's unpleasant or it's against my nature, I'm still going to do it. Whereas the chasidah does it only because it's its nature. So just like the lion goes and rips a zebra, And no one says it's a bad thing because it's its nature. No one says that the Hasidah is a good thing because that's its nature. So what is the job of a person is, the whole idea is to have the godly soul overcome the animal soul. Meaning you've got to push aside your nature, your nurture, and your inclinations, and you've got to allow your godly soul to overtake. That's the job of a person. But how do we do that?
So
Self-work.
if someone has, some people have more of a godly soul
Correct.
at the base.
Correct.
So does that take away from the good that they might?
If you look in Tanya, he explains that there's two types of people, which are mentioned in the prophet. Oved Elokim v'asher lo avado. He who serves God and he who doesn't serve God. And he proves that the person who doesn't serve God is a person who does all the mitzvot and all the Torah and everything. So why is he called somebody who doesn't serve God? If he's doing all the Torah mitzvot, it's because it's natural to him. He might be very, like he's a hermit. He likes to study. There's no Torah. The world doesn't mean anything to him. He has no temptations. So even if he's doing everything right, he's not considered a person who's serving God. So that then explains how such a person would be considered serving God and how he makes an effort. But the bottom line is you got to make an effort. And that's why Hillel said to this person, he said, doing unto the other what you don't want done to yourself comes from which soul? Of course the godly soul. The animal soul doesn't care about the other. The animal soul cares about himself. Does that make sense? Okay, so if I've now got to make my godly soul default, how do I do that? You got to work on it. How do you work on it? Through Torah, mitzvot. The only way to get your godly soul from the back burner to the front burner is going to the Jewish gym. Just like you want to have muscles, you can't just say I'm going to have muscles. Okay, let's talk about it and I'll bring muscles. Let's talk about the importance of exercise. You can talk from today till tomorrow. It's not going to help. You got to do the exercise. The same thing, I can talk to you about the godly soul and how important it is. But if you're not going to do the exercises to make the godly soul default or at least have an influence, it's not going to work. What are the exercises of the godly soul? Only Torah mitzvot. Doing yoga is not a godly soul. It's not the godly. Why? Because God didn't say so. Maybe a beautiful thing to do, but it's not the godly soul.
So you're actually now describing Esav and Yaakov.
1 second, maybe because that's already.
Difference between the.
Yeah, it's true. So, there is definitely that connection, but.
I really believe that a child doesn't have a godly soul till 13.
Does a child have a godly soul? So the answer is like this. It says in the Kabbalah that it's the godly soul is attributed, if I can use that word, is like designated or to the person. But he has no effect on the person. So he has it, but it's on the periphery. What happens is, it's like, imagine two train tracks. They go like this and they converge and they become one. Have you seen your life? So the convergence, locking in, happens on the bar mitzvah. And that's why actually the Hebrew word is Gmar Knisat Nefesh Elokit. The end, when it actually happens, when it goes in. So it's been allocated. That's the word. You have a godly soul which is allocated to you.
I feel like I've seen my kids' godly soul before 13.
Yeah, 100%.
Full awakening.
Yeah. Okay.
So they have it,
When
but
they're responsible and they have to do this,
they're very spiritual. And when you say godly soul, it means like a child, because he's got the godly soul, so it's part of his awareness. So you talk about Hashem, you talk to him about spiritual things, they connect it straight away.
Yeah.
But it's very rare to see a child who's 5 and he says, "Oh, you have that toy? Actually, it's fine, you have it, I don't want it, it's okay." Never jealous about your toy. Just because you have it, I want it. God forbid. What? I have one sweet only? But you know what? You have the sweet, it's okay. I still haven't seen that. Not with 5-year-olds, not with 10-year-olds, not with 12-year-olds. And it may be, all that happens is that maybe a 12-year-old can give up a sweet because the sweet you don't care about. But if let's say got a Nintendo or a Wii or a watch or something which is important, you don't see that. Anything that's important to the child, so when he's 3, it's a sweet. When he's 5, it's a bit more than that. When he's 7, you're not giving up for the other one. You've seen a 2-year-old who says, "Oh, mommy's sleeping. I better not wake her up." Or he wants to, screaming and shouting, "But I just fell asleep." How could you be so selfish? Right? Because the godly soul is not there. It's not having an influence. He's there. Do you understand?
Yeah, it takes a long time for children to develop empathy and
Exactly. And that all comes from the godly soul. Again, you can have an animal soul that has empathy. It's possible, but you're not working on it. That's not the main thing. So Hillel was telling this man, he's saying to him, "Listen, The whole idea is that the godly soul should be in front of the animal soul. And what's the best manifestation of it? What's the biggest proof that your godly soul is on the front burner? The proof that you have godly soul awareness. What you don't like to do for yourself, you won't do for somebody else. Only somebody who's godly soul aware, who's in touch with his godly soul and conducts his life, will be a person that won't do unto the other person which he doesn't like, because he's so sensitive, he's going about other people, he's not ego, selfish and so on. So that's what the whole Torah, and therefore he says to him, but how'd you get there? Through all the Torah mitzvot. Every time you do another mitzvah, it makes you more delicate, more edel, more conscious of somebody else, makes you more in touch with your godly soul, makes your godly soul more, you've taken it to the gym, it's more alive, more empowered.
It
So,
takes 70 years, no? To take
takes time. It definitely takes time, and the Torah mitzvah helps us. It's the biggest aid. So does that make sense what Hillel said? Now we have an answer? Okay, now everything's going to make sense. Now we're going to see how everything happens. Yaakov says to Rachel, she comes to him and she says, I am worried, I don't have children. Why don't I have children? Because I haven't done good deeds. Rachel didn't do good deeds? But where were the good deeds coming from? Was it coming from a godly soul or from an animal soul? Remember we said that you could have a person that does good deeds, it's not because they worked on themselves or because they made a big effort.
The issue is from their own thing it came out, from their own interest.
But when she
Maybe Rachel was so kind, meaning she was born with a predisposition to be... all the good deeds that she was doing was coming from her animal soul. So Leah, we know, what does Leah mean? We spoke about it last week. Tired. Remember we spoke that it's all about her issues, her problems. She was like Esau. She had a very strong evil inclination, ego, but she worked on herself. The whole idea of crying represents the idea that she was crying over her battles. It represents her. So Rachel's looking at Leah and saying she has kids. Why? Because she serves Hashem. She works hard. She was able to. That's what it means she could. Of course she knew she had good deeds. But you can't compare the two good deeds. If Leah's doing good deeds, it has to be that she's doing it intentionally from a godly soul, overcoming her animal soul. But me comes naturally, so I don't have any good deeds. So she comes to Yaakov and she says to him, I don't have any good deeds because I don't have my... And even, by the way, remember we asked the question, but she gave the signs to her sister. Wasn't that an act of altruism?
there was love to her sister.
It was love to her sister. It also maybe was natural to her, so she didn't count that. But then we said that Hashem remembers later on that she did it. We asked the question, well, Hashem only remembers now, she did it all those years ago. We'll see in a moment. So she comes to Yaakov and she says, how am I going to know? What am I supposed to do? How do I do mitzvot in a way that I overcome my animal soul and that I can make a difference in this world? So the Torah uses the words Vayichar af Yaakov berachel. The Yaakov's wrath, anger, and that's how the translation is in Rachel. But actually, if you look at the words, it says not at Rachel, berachel, which means within Rachel. Our rabbis explain that actually charon af, which means anger, but it can also mean passion, it means heat. Yaakov Rachel needed some energy, some heat to really work on herself to become a special person. What he's transferring it to her. That's what it's saying. He took his, and we're going to see also that Yaakov himself also had to work on himself very hard to become this extra person, because he had the same issue as Rachel. And what was that? He was also naturally kind and so on and so forth. Vayomer atachat Elokim, he's saying there is no way, instead of working the godly soul, Elokim is the godly soul, he's saying there's no shortcut. What he's telling her is, if a person only uses the animal soul, even if he's doing all the good in the world, it doesn't really make a difference. You're not making an effect. He says there's no shortcut to Elokim. Elokim is the godly soul. If the godly soul is not engaged, if the whole purpose of a person, as Hillel told that man, the whole reason, the reason they come into this world is to get the godly soul to the forefront, to start engage it. And then we can achieve the biggest miracles. Then everything will happen. He's saying there is no way that she's saying, look, I have a natural incline to do the right thing, but it comes from animal soul. Yaakov says to her, listen, you need to find within you the tremendous power. You need to work hard to, even though you're naturally good, and even though you're naturally, your animal soul is like a godly soul, you still have to find a way to engage your godly soul, and that it should overcome your animal soul. And we're going to see something that Rachel does, which is unbelievable, and that's why sadly Hashem remembers. Because when Rachel gave the signs to her sister, did it come from a godly soul or from an animal soul?
From what you say, I don't know. Yeah.
She loved her sister, but also she was so kind and so compassionate, and it was her nature, that it could definitely be that she didn't have to make an effort. And that's why that's not good enough.
But it wasn't easy for her.
How do we know? We still don't know. When a person does something, we don't know their inner motive. So by Rachel, it makes sense to say that her inner motive was her animal soul. It wasn't the godly soul overcoming the animal soul. However, only many years later, it was proven that it was actually a godly soul. Once it was proven that it was a godly soul, straight after the Torah says Hashem remembers Rachel and she has a child. How do we prove it? It's only after she does something that we actually discover in retrospect what? That it was. And what is that?
Well, she gives her maid and then she...
So first of all, she gives her maid. 1 second. When she gives her maid, so that's already an act of...
Kindness.
No, it's an act of going against your nature.
With kindness in a way.
Yeah, it's
Which is
kindness,
better
but...
than what you would be usually.
No, it's the point. The whole point is going against your nature. Because which woman wants to share her husband? So here she gives her maid to Yaakov. That's already an act that it definitely cannot come from her animal soul. It's from her godly soul because she wants him to have more children and so on and so on. So that's already one thing which happens, and then she has a child. But there's also something else.
And she gives him to Leah.
Reuven, he finds mandarins. And he comes to his mother Leah and he gives her the mandarins. So Rachel says to Leah, can I have some of your jasmine mandarins? What does Rachel say to her? What does Leah say to her? You took my husband. Now you want my mandarins. You remember that story? Let's think about it for a moment. Alechem shalom. Rachel gave the signs to Leah.
She looked at the sun and said that you had a son.
Rachel gave the signs to Leah or not?
Yes. So she took her husband.
So who took whose husband?
Leah took her husband.
Leah took the husband from Rachel. So when Rachel comes to Leah and says, can I have some of the jasmine? What does she say? You took my husband? What should have Leah said? What should have Rachel responded? You took my husband. How dare you say I took your husband? But she didn't say that. Not only she didn't say that,
She says...
why doesn't Leah know that? Does Leah know it?
No, she doesn't know.
She doesn't know because when Rachel gave her the signs,
She didn't tell
she didn't tell her it's the signs. She just gave her the signs as information. Do you understand? So Leah never knew she got the signs from Rachel. When Yaakov asked her for the signs, she gave the signs. She happened to know the information. How did she know? Because Rachel told her. But she didn't know it was a sign. Do you understand? So when Rachel says to Leah, when Leah says to Rachel, you took my husband, Rachel doesn't respond, why are you saying that? Because she understands why she says that. Because Leah doesn't even know. So now you actually see that all these years, she doesn't say anything to Rachel, to Leah, her sister. And even when she attacks her, you're stealing my husband. Now, it doesn't matter how good you are, what a person, that even the animal soul is a kind person, it would be the natural instinct to say, what are you talking about? I gave you the signs.
So it's only then that it's the
Exactly, but she doesn't say that. She keeps quiet.
Well, it was always the godly soul, but we never know that.
But this was a proof that actually where did it come from? Came from the godly soul. Because if it came from the animal soul, what's the animal soul? Animal soul by definition, even when it does kindness, it does only what's comfortable for it. The second it's no comfortable, the animal soul says, sorry, I'm not interested. Like my rabbi once told me, he said, how do you know if it's coming from the animal soul or the godly soul? He said, there's some people, Huh?
I'm saying it's so much harder for someone naturally kind.
No, because everyone has their challenges. There's no such thing that person's born that everything's easy.
No, but
So the places that they overcome,
have to work like I don't know if it's a lot more, but it doesn't make
good things, maybe.
no, our naturally good things.
Yeah.
so I'll give you an example. Let's say a person, he likes changing tires. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? Good thing. What does he do? He helps everyone who has a flat tire. It's a good thing? Yeah. But it's coming from his animal soul. How does this person do it from his godly soul? Your neighbor knocks on your door and he says,
someone he doesn't like.
or one example, he likes everyone. Somebody calls you at 4 o'clock in the morning, he says, can you change your tire? Even if you like changing tires, you don't like changing at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
Or if it's raining, you like changing tires, but you like it that the rain's pouring on your head? Impossible that somebody likes that. But he says, you know what? I'm still going to do it.
Yeah.
Now you're taking your talent, something that you like, something that God's given you, but you're combining it with your godly soul. Now it's what it's all about. So we're not saying that you shouldn't use your talents and the things.
Because the truth is, it's all from God.
But it shouldn't be limited to only when I enjoy it or when it's pleasant to me. Even when it's not pleasant, but you should still do it. Here, was it pleasant to Rachel when her sister says to her, you stole my husband? No. And still she behaves the same way. Now we know it's coming from a godly soul. This is where she forced out her godly soul, which is what Yaakov was telling her. Atachat Elokim Anochi. You think you can't do anything except for through engaging your godly soul. Yeah, you have it maybe hard. What people think is so easy for you, actually, in a subtle point, is actually hard for you. But the opportunity will come where you can prove that it's your godly soul, and then miracles are going to happen. And indeed, she does it with the maid, she does it with this, and boom, she has a child. So you see that both Rachel, which we just saw, works so hard on herself to bring out the godly soul, or to make this extra effort. We see the same thing with Yaakov in this week's parsha. Well, we see that Rachel had to work hard like that. Where do we see that Yaakov has to work hard like this?
He likes his brother. He writes his brother.
So he has this whole thing with his brother. The Torah tells us in this week's parasha, approaching him. What does the Torah say? Just before he approaches his angel, Esav, what does it say? Let's look at it inside. Page 229. It says on verse 25. You have it? 230. 231? Yeah. 231. It says Yaakov forgot some small jars and went back. He was left alone. A man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. What is the verse? It's a very famous verse in the Torah. Vayivater Yaakov levado, vayavek ishimo ad alot hashachar. So Rashi brings the commentary that he was the angel of Esav that he was fighting with. But in the Torah, what does it say? It says Vayivater Yaakov levado. What does levad mean? Alone. So if he was alone, how could he fight somebody?
It's himself. He's overcoming himself.
Exactly.
It's himself. So Yaakov also has to have this inner battle to overcome himself. What does Yaakov have to overcome himself?
Materialism. His like strong materialism at the time and he has to become
So there's many interpretations. There's many interpretations which we've discussed in the past, but the exact same response that Yaakov tells Rachel, that there's no way that you can achieve anything without first fighting yourself, without changing. Fighting yourself means it's natural for me, it's good for me, but I'm going to overcome it. I'm going to go out of my comfort zone. That means to fight within yourself. He demanded that from Rachel, and then he demands it from himself.
Is that when he gets angry?
It's not when he gets angry. Here in this week's parasha, if you notice like this, Esav is coming to kill Yaakov. And then suddenly Esav meets Yaakov, and what happens? He embraces him, he hugs him. What happened? Yaakov worked on himself. Yaakov changed himself. He's no longer having the relationship with Esav which comes to him naturally. Rather, he has a relationship with Esav that he forces himself to have.
But the answer that he's actually fighting himself is problematic, because if you read the sentence after, he says, ויראה כי לא יכל לו ויגע בכף יעקב ואבקו עמו ויאמר שלחני. It means there was somebody else. Who's שלחני?
Agreed. So why does it say ויבטו יעקב לבדו?
Maybe he went there alone and somebody joined
Well,
him.
so then you can't say alone. It says he was left alone. It should have said ויבטו יעקב עם המלאך.
Okay, so how do you explain it?
Okay, so that's why the Torah is multi-leveled. So there was first his own inner turmoil, and he managed to. Then he fights with the angel of Esav. And the only reason he succeeds with overcoming the angel of Esav is because he first came to himself, he managed to force himself. So you see that both Yaakov and Rachel, even though they had a natural predisposition of being good people from their animal soul, even they had a lot of work to do, and they succeeded. So what do we see? Are they the type of people that have been able to engage with their godly soul? Yes. If they're people that are engaged with their godly soul, what did we say? The Mishnah says, what is a person who's engaged with his godly soul, overcome his animal soul? What's the proof for it? What did Hillel tell the man? How do we know a person's been to the gym? He's trained his animal soul to go against it. He's tapped into his godly soul and he's doing things not because it's comfortable, not because it's natural for him, but because it's his godly soul. What's the proof for it? Somebody, what did Hillel say? Somebody who doesn't do unto the other what he doesn't want unto himself. So both Yaakov and Rachel at this point now after they both had their inner, Rachel with her problems, Yaakov with his issues, are now people that they don't do unto the other what they don't unto themselves. That's what they've reached after a lifelong struggle. Now that we understand where they are, we can go and see our opening question, and we can understand what was our first question about the name. Now everything's going to make sense. We're going to see how it's not coming because they disregard each other, because Yaakov doesn't love Rabbi. To the contrary, it's a conversation of two people who are trying not to do on the other person what they don't want on themselves.
Fair enough.
רגע, you haven't seen how. חכי.
It's like jobs. Yaakov did to his brother what nobody else would want to do to somebody else. He took his blessing.
Correct. And what's the first thing? You're beautiful. What is the first thing he says? What is the first thing he says to Esav when he sees him? קח נא את ברכתי אשר הובאת לך. Take my blessing that belongs to you.
So why he tells the angel here Barkeni Shuv?
That's a different thing. Huh? What? No. Who says Barcheni? The angel says to Yaakov Barcheni. Yeah.
ויאמר שלחני, ואמר לו, אשלחך כי אם ברכתני, I won't let you go until you bless me. Why does he want him to bless him again? Because he wants to reassure what his father blessed him probably before his meeting.
No, and it says over there, ויברך אותו שם, and he blesses him. It's a different blessing. No, wait, that's it's. What do you want to see? Look what Yaakov. What?
So Yaakov blesses Esav.
When Yaakov meets Esav, what does Yaakov say to Esav? Look.
I will not let you go unless you.
Yeah, no, look. First Yaakov, then we can do it. Page 233.
Yeah.
Verse 11. 235. Verse 11, 235. Please take my gift which has been brought to you. So in Hebrew it says, קח נא את ברכתי אשר הובאת לך. Take my blessing that I've received and I'm giving it back to you. I don't want it anymore.
But
Yaakov,
the question is, does he mean birkati? It means really that blessing, or does it mean
So,
whatever
definitely according to-
presence he brought in?
so that's what we say in the Torah as multi-leveled, and it's definitely that is the interpretation. One thing is for sure that we can't argue with. Yaakov and Esav are suddenly best friends. How does that happen? Obviously, it's got to do with the fact that Yaakov has this whole, the Torah introduces their meeting by the fact that Yaakov works on himself. He does something. That's again, we did a shiur about it. We could do maybe next year again, explaining the whole inner battle Yaakov and Esav, which you mentioned, and how Yaakov comes to terms with him not being Esav. And he gives back everything, but the point is that he has to work on himself. Vayavek Yaakov, he has a ma'avak. He has a battle. It's not coming to him easy.
Because he's a new.
Of course, he gets a new name. Why does he get a new name? Because now Israel, he's no longer a follower, he's a leader. He had to do something to change himself. That's the point. Without going into the details, because we don't have the time, the point is that Yaakov,
He had to stop competing with
he had to stop competing. But the point is that he had everything easy until then, in his service of Hashem, in his inner work. And here there's no longer, he tells Rachel in last week's parasha, there's no shortcut. Atachat Elokim ani, you want instead of working with your godly soul, it don't work. He has to tell himself, and he does that. So now that they both worked on bringing the godly soul into action, now let's understand what their conversation is. Do you remember in last week's parasha, towards the end, they leave. What does Rachel do? She steals her father's Salim. She steals her father's idol worship. She puts it in the camel and she sits on it and she hides it. So Lavan comes and he says to Yaakov, why did you steal my idol worships? What does Yaakov say?
No one stole it, I promise you.
He says, no one stole it, I promise you. Yeah, but what does he say? No one stole it.
Someone will die. Whoever took it will die.
He makes an oath, right? Whoever stole it will die. Who stole it? Rachel. So what happens? That's why she dies prematurely, because of that oath. That's in this week's parasha when we read that Rachel. That's how we started. We read that they're dying. That Rachel's dying. You think does Yaakov understand the reason she's dying? Of course he understands. We understand it. He didn't understand it, right? He knew. Of course he knew. It was something that he said. Now Rachel, did she hear him saying it? Of course she did. It was a conversation. She's sitting there on the camel. Lavan is there confronting Yaakov. And he says, whoever stole it should die. Rachel's right? Shut up, what are you saying? Okay? So now she's on a deathbed. He knows because he sees she's dying. He found out, not only then, he found out earlier. By the way, he didn't say whoever stole it will die, Yamut. He said, Lo yichyeh, which means will not have a long life. And now, so the second Lavan left, Rachel said to him, I stole it, what do you do? So now he realizes that she's not going to have a long life. And indeed, when she's having this baby, they see that she's dying. So Yaakov is sitting by a deathbed. Both he and his wife know what's the reason why this birth is bringing the death. It's because of this story. So now, she did it for a good reason, but what? Okay? Huh? Listen, of course, it was all part of God's plan and so on and so forth, but it came through that. It's like when a person drives recklessly, God forbid, and he kills somebody in an accident. Was the person who died meant to die? Yes. Should it have to come through this? No. Whatever. So the bottom point is that now she's at a deathbed and they're both thinking, could you imagine the feelings? How is Yaakov feeling? Yaakov is feeling terrible, responsible, terrible. So what does Rachel say? She says, when this child is born, what? Ben Oni. What is Ben Oni? Son of my sorrow. What is the sorrow? She's saying, Rachel is blaming herself. She's saying, I stole the idol worship. Had I not, it's not your fault. You did nothing wrong. Why in your mind would you even imagine that your wife should steal? So therefore, the problem that I'm dying is because of me. So she says, when you see Binyamin and for the rest of your life, and you see him, you're going to be thinking, it's because I made this curse or this oath. No, it's because of me. So she doesn't want Yaakov to think it's because of him. She said, it's because of me. Yaakov says to himself, 1 second, my wife is going to die and she's going to think that the reason is because of her. I can't let that happen. He says, no, because of Binyamin. What's Yamin? Right, but what does Yamin represent also? It's oath. Yamin is oath. Why? Because, as it says in Tehillim 149, V'minam Yamin Sheker. Right? When it says, David HaMelech says, when they're making an oath in vain, he uses the word Yamin. Why? Because people, when they would make an oath, they would use their right hand and make the oath. So he was saying, no, it's because of my oath. Because I made the oath. That's why he doesn't want his wife to die. She doesn't want his wife to think that it's because of her. That's the last thought she has to have, that she's dying because of her son. No, it's because of me. I take responsibility. So here you have two people that I don't want to be done to myself. I don't want to feel, don't do to somebody else, right? Who wouldn't want to take blame on themselves? Don't put blame on someone. So they're both the country saying, no, I'm for blame. She's saying, no, I'm for blame. And actually Yaakov calls the name Binyamin for the rest of history. He takes the responsibility, not his wife. It should never be brought down tradition that Rachel died prematurely because she did something wrong. She didn't. She meant well, and that's fine. I should have never said that oath. It's my fault. So, exactly. So he didn't love her. He loved her so much, and he takes responsibility, and the responsibility lies in him. For the rest of history, it's Yaakov's responsibility, not hers. And that you can only reach when a person has worked on himself. If a person thinks, I could be the same, I'll tell my wife, it's all me, not you. She's gonna, don't work. Come on, who are you kidding? The second there's a little thing, you'll blame him, she'll blame you. Even if you won't say it, you'll think it. Right? So therefore, the only way is to work on yourself. What does it mean to work on yourself? So people think, I'm working on myself, I'm donating, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm going to shield. That's not working on yourself. Maybe get uncomfortable. That's what it means. And the greater you are, the more talented you are, the harder it is. It doesn't mean you can't do it. And by the way, also the other things that are a big struggle for you, they're also not easy. Just because you have a big Yetzer Hara, let's say, you think it was easy for Leah? Because she had the opposite of Rachel and things were, she also had to work hard. So whether they're good for you or whether they're hard for you, still working hard. But when you work hard, that's when things happen. That's when Rachel had a child. And that's when we see this most amazing expression of love. So what is this? We said, how is this relevant to us? Of course it's relevant to us. It's relevant to us to explain to us what Hillel told that man. What's the whole point of our life? Is not doing what's comfortable for us, but doing the opposite, doing which is going out of our comfort zone. Because that's the whole Torah. That's what it's all about. And if you want to succeed, there's only one way to do it. Torah mitzvot. That's what he told him. Zoi kol Torah kula. Because every time you do a Torah mitzvot, so study, you could say, Wednesday morning, there's this important show on the BBC 4. I don't want to miss it. I don't know.
Yes, but the more you learn, the more you grow, it comes for you naturally.
No, comes harder. Kol hagadol mechavero yitzchak gadol mimeno. When it became for the first year, I promise you it's easy. I'll have it at the shiur. But the more you come, suddenly it becomes more important. Suddenly there's a doctors, there's a this, there's a girlfriends, there's even people from Israel that they've come and we need to go and support them for the army. I don't know what. It becomes harder and harder. And then also with the mitzvot. So many people think, he's from, it's easy for him. For me, to keep Shabbat is so much harder. No. It's actually the more you're in, the more you invest, it becomes harder.
Yeah.
Much harder.
If you don't invest, then you won't know.
And then you need to
won't
invest.
to anymore.
Exactly.
And it still keeps coming in.
Okay. We can discuss it, but it's definitely that's the way.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Oh, it's like when you're playing a game Mario. As you're advancing in the... What you trying to say? Yeah. So many times people say to me, oh, yeah.
More naturally.
Again.
Like in the beginning.
No, Natalie, I'm not talking about that at all. Not talking about that. Of course, hergel nase teva. The more you do something, the more natural it comes to. But at the same time, your Yetzer Hara in other stuff becomes even greater. So for example, people say to me, this guy lo mevin, how did he steal the money? He's a from guy, he goes to shul 3 times a day. And I tell him, do you know why? Because he's a from guy 3 times a day. That's why the Yetzer Hara is attacking. People say, how could he speak Lashon Hara? This guy studies Daf Yomi. This guy does da. So maybe the Daf Yomi is easy for him. But the Lashon Hara is not. I know a guy is fighting with his friend in the most terrible way. I can't even imagine. He would never do it if he was less from. But precisely because he's become more religious and he's doing what? Now suddenly he's not able to overcome, find shalom. Because the Yetzer Hara wants to get him on that. Because like a thief, where does a thief go? When he wants to steal? No weakness. He goes where people have money. No, I'm trying to say, Ganavim, when the thieves, they go to the favelas. They go to the place there's nothing to steal. They go where they can find Rolexes. So they go to the suburb but the security is strong. Where's more security? In the suburb. So why would they go to the suburb if there's more security, more police, more patrol? Go to a place there's no security. No, I'm not going to go where there's no security because there's no security, there's nothing to steal. So I'm going to go where there's more security, harder, I'm going to steal. The Yetzer Hara, where does he want to go? Where the person's anyway doing bad. Where the person's anyway, I don't care, let him stay there. He'll go and attack the person that's doing the mitzvot, that's doing the Torah. Because if he can get him, it's a much bigger win. So where's he going to attack him? Where it's easy for him? Where he's got used to and accustomed? No. He's going to attack him another round somewhere else. Do you understand? So that's the point that we're saying. We're not going to attack you what you do. Yeah, for me, I grew up all my life, Shomer Shabbat. It means nothing to me not to turn the phone on Shabbat. I've never had anything. But trust me, I've got plenty of things to deal with the Yetzer Hara. A person thinks that because he's got all these things, so that's it, he's done to the country. Anyway, so the bottom line, the message is that the whole parasha is not telling us a story about Yaakov, Rachel, once upon a time. It's telling us that this is the point. It's about seeing the other person even before you, as Yaakov and Rachel did. But that comes after our full life. That didn't happen when they first got married. That only happened much later, that both of them were able to so be altruistic, so care only about the other person, because that they've done this battle. And therefore I think it's a very important message for us. And Bezrat Hashem, we should also be like Yaakov.